Stars counting. Here we go. All right, we are live once again. Meeting here on this forum. We have one primary objective, though we have not confined ourselves to that, which is trying to get Belizeans together abroad and at home, and hopefully move forward in a more united way than we have been doing so far. There are big differences between the Belizeans in the diaspora and the Belizeans at home. I have one sticking point, of course, and that is the running for office. We have discussed this ad nauseum. Leonard, you there? You disappeared again. Oh no, here we go. All right, Leonard, Joe Koway, are you familiar with Joe?
Yes, sir. I'm familiar with Mr. Koi.
All right. We have.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he knows me or knows of me enough, but I'm very familiar with the gentleman.
Okay. We have asked him to join us this evening. Gregory Morrison has opted out. Gregory is a fourth member of our panel, Joe. And we, from week to week, we discuss things. I was unfortunately not able to be here last week. I was afflicted by one virus, there one flu. I don't think it was the main one, but it knocked me out that day in particular. I overcome it quickly because I lean on my herbs and whatnot, and I'm still not 100%, but I'm not doing badly at all. So good to be here this week, gentlemen. I understand I had a few discussions last week. Anything that you want to recap and make we throw it again, George?
Well, I kind of ended up substituting in a chair for you. A pleasant good night, everybody in electronica land, both at home and abroad. Once you're on the media now, you're global, whether you want to or not, or whether you believe it or not. So, good night to everyone on the planet Earth that might be tuning in. This show, just to punctuate what you have said, Mr. Chairman, is really a forum for open discourse and discussion on a full range of topics that would impact Belizeans everywhere, including the diaspora as well as the planet. A lot of the issues are very, very current and they're topical. Some of the issues are really germane to nation building. So one of the things that we have been dealing with and wrestling with for some time is in relation to the Belize Constitution. Our people, definitely in the land electronica, if they have been tuning in, would know that we have been dealing with the Belize Constitution for perhaps the last month or so intermittently. And that is mainly as a function of the fact that there's a revision of the Constitution, of the Belize Constitution. And where we are with that is a group has been put together, a commission, a constitutional commission has been put together to examine, to advise on the path forward, to come up with a distillate of what we should be looking at in relation to the Constitution. The name of that commission is really the People's Reform Constitutional Commission. And I'm saying that to indicate that at its core is the fact that this should be an output of the people and country of Belize everywhere, including obviously the diaspora. There has been some issues that we have treated with, but like good poems, the discussion and the discourse on the Constitution is never finished. It's always a work in progress. We have dealt with, for example, the issue of uniting foreigners, including and especially Guatemalans with Belizean citizenship. We have dealt on a recurrent basis, for example, with the issue of people, Belizeans living in the diaspora, being accorded the right to run for office at every level, the municipal as well as the national level. And we have dealt with a number of other issues related to the Constitution, but that has not been the subtotal of what we have talked about. We have also talked about the Belizean economy. I know that Brother Joe was a former minister of government, and definitely as a former and now retired public officer, I personally look to Mr. Cowie as not only a seasoned politician, but a learned man in relation to the issue of finances generally. I believe Brother Joe is really an accountant by trade, but he's really a learned man across the board. I believe that at some point, Mr. Joe Cowie may have been a public officer, well respected. We have also dealt with issues, everything from COVID to what it is that we should be doing in relation to the Guatemalan issue. So it's really the way it works is that the agenda for a particular night kind of falls in place. We don't necessarily plan way ahead to say we will be discussing these 25 things. There are times when we set the agenda. For example, we dealt with the Belize Constitution, not only the Belize Constitution, but we also dealt with the state of the economy of Belize. Those are kind of preset agenda items. Mr. Chairman, I don't know, before I go back to you, I don't know, having said all of that, there's nothing burning for me except to say that there's a current issue of public transportation, i.e., the bus issue that I would want to see us deal with perhaps tonight. But obviously it could be dealt with some other time, but it's really a hot topic right now. Before I hand back to you, no?
I I agree. I believe we should, and that is indeed a pressing issue. It's there. The bus owners are thinking about striking. They're concerned. I think I'd also want to touch on the war in Ukraine, because that I think has huge implications for us across the globe. I wanted to touch on Biden's visit to Ukraine, which I personally think was ill-advised. I mean, and I don't know if he had the authority to go over there and make the wide promises that he did, as far as suggesting that they would be in it as long as it takes. I think that kind of like to arbitrarily make such a promise, I don't see it wise either. I think the problem with that is that had something happened to him over there, that would have drawn America full-fledged into that war. You couldn't, and that could have happened by any means. I mean, if not only the Russians, but even overzealous Ukrainian wanting to have America be more engaged could have done something silly there. So, and when I think about the amount of money that they have sent over there, 100 billion with a B, billion, that is interesting. When America itself is in $1 trillion worth of debt. I don't know what you guys have, if it's so beyond, if you believe it's beyond the scope of our expertise or realm of discussion. But let me see if anybody has any thoughts on that or anything else that you want to cover tonight. Leonard, what do you think?
Well, I'm sitting here in the United States of America, and I don't have a vote. I'm not a citizen of the country. From time to time, because of my interest in knowledge and foreign affairs especially, I kind of have opinions on things that sometimes it's best for me to keep my mouth shut, because I'm not as informed or I'm not in a position to be able to say, well, I have at least a penny in the dollar, you know, which I don't. In regards to foreign affairs of this country, unless it touches my country Belize or has an effect on my country Belize, most of the time I try to stay away from commenting publicly, which this particular show is. But
Right. So that
in regards to whether or not Mr. Biden should have gone, it's a done deal. It happened already. They decided that. They decided, on the basis of their awareness of their need for safety and everything else. So I wouldn't question after the fact, the issue of them having done so.
They who?
I think the chairman was quite well observant in the idea that any individual, whether a zealot from one side or the other, could have just as well created a major international issue, So, but personally, I'd rather not make a public statement too deep into these people in business because, as I said, unless they affect my country, then you hear me they holler and scream like the pig will get the bitch licked.
All right. That's saying nothing with a lot of words. And I can understand that. Yeah, right. I think it's affecting us already because when you go into the grocery store, you see the prices of goods going sky high, and they're blaming it on the war mostly. A lot of things are happening that's affecting us. With America, and it is true. When something happens over there, we gonna get some kind. Even when it get cold over there, we get cold after a while. So we are affected, and I think so that is it might not be time for you to scream and holler yet, but you might want to get ready for that, no? So all right, but if we're not to, because like you said, you're over there, but regardless of where you are, we're not out of the reach of Big Brother, and we're affected one way or the other, and anything that we say could and might be held against us. Let me put it that way. But we certainly could discuss. George, any thoughts?
Yes. I know that we haven't asked Brother Joe to input, but I would want him to input at this stage in terms of what he wants us to discuss. But one other thing, Mr. Chairman and gentlemen, there's this TikTok. I'm calling it a podcast. I don't know if that's the right word. Circulating. I don't know if any of you gentlemen has seen it, but it was essentially an interview posed by a journalist somewhere on the planet Earth. And it seemed to have been in relation to the whole climate change issue. This journalist, and I'm not saying it from the standpoint of a kind of racist overtone, but this white journalist who I took to be in a situation and in a setting at one of the developed countries. It was either her in Britain or the United States or someplace in the far white north. But essentially, what she was asking Mayor Muttley, the Prime Minister of Barbados, was why is it that you guys want us to input into the remedies for climate change? You guys need to toe your own line. A fair amount of the conversation going into the conference of the parties, aka COP. We did COP, I believe, number 27. A fair amount of the conversation going into the COP is the developed world, or the developing world, basically asking the developed world to contribute to the remedies that would address the issue of climate change. And Mayor Muttley, who is really emerging as the voice of not only the Caribbean but the developed world, she's very articulate and informed. She basically said to this lady, every time we talk about this issue, you guys seem to be suggesting to us that the ills of our society, i.e. corruption, etc., is what is keeping us back. But really, corruption is not specific to the developing world. Corruption is across the board. And so that is not even a consideration that would be specific to us. What you guys need to keep in mind is that the whole climate change issue has been driven by the Industrial Revolution. Where did that start? The Industrial Revolution, as we all know, was an output of Britain and the developed world, and it has impacted the planet. And so Mayor Muttley was saying, keep in mind that it's really the Industrial Revolution that has fueled climate change, the warming of the planet. And we are not asking you to do anything outside what you should be doing morally. And so you guys should not be standing on the soapbox to say to us, I'm going to fix up the corruption first, so that you can then contribute to your own solution. What we should understand is that the globe has now become the global village, and it is our collective responsibility to solve the climate crisis. You developed countries have no moral grounds to tell us to go and do your homework. Developing countries to sign this is existential, and it's threatening humanity. So at some point, if we have the time, Mr. Chair, perhaps we could delve into the whole climate change issue, the impacts of it, how it is affecting our life, how it's affecting our circumstances in terms of the quality of life, and what goes on going forward. No, it's really an existential threat for the planet.
All right.
No?
I think what happened, Joe had suggested that he wanted to be just an observer for this week. But I don't think we can afford that. I don't think we're allowing for be just that. So we're going to try press on to see if you have any opinions on these issues. George apparently wants to discuss climate change. Apparently now, I imagine from what I've heard from both Leonard and George is that the Ukraine issue, they're not anywhere.
No.
Discuss.
No, Mr. Chair. Sorry to interrupt you, but the Ukraine issue is really number one. Number two for me. The Florida issue is really a burning. Not the Florida, the public transport bus issue. Is if there's an order of issues, I would see that as number one. But really, you cannot underestimate the importance of the Ukraine war in how it is affecting our everyday life. So that's a priority for me, speaking for myself now.
Well, we could delve into that a bit.
It goes beyond the visit of President Biden.
Yes, it
Far
does.
beyond that.
It does. There's a lot more to that. Joe, well, let's look at the first after. Let's give that priority. The issue with the bus industry, because we're getting a lot of different views here from people, in particular those on social media. What you've been in government, we've seen over the years the bus, it has been a perpetual problem. We have not been able to make any headway. In fact, we went backwards for a while, because I remember when Batty was bringing in some premier buses, and the system, the quality of service was improving. They were showing movies on the buses, serving lunch on the buses. Then we went right back to the old school buses, the cramped up school buses. What do you think, Joe? What is your impression? What should be happening? Are we on the right road, or are we missing something here?
Gentlemen, I think the issue of this, the busing issue in this particular time, is clearly a case of where maybe we need to relook at the whole country in terms of the market economy. The whole idea of a market economy, evidently, is that you will have competition. And the competition is to breed efficiency. But what is unfortunate in small countries, and Belize is very, very small compared to other small countries like Guatemala would be considered small, maybe up by 11 million. But what we have learned from within the Caribbean and the Central American countries is that whenever we want to adapt, which we have done, the market economy, we have to understand that there's a lot of market failures in small countries like Belize, simply because we are not large enough to have competition. So I will just throw one or two things quickly, like electricity. You know, how many electrical companies we can have to distribute it with all these poles all over the country. Obviously, it is difficult. to have competition in distribution, but you can have some competition in the generation of electricity. So you generate, you buy, and you distribute. Now, let's come to the transportation industry, which I was one time responsible for. And we had worked out a solution to what we thought would be the problem for Belize. And this was with the help of the Inter-American Development Bank expertise and money. Is that we have to accept that competition in the busing system, in the transportation system, is not practical because you cannot have buses just running all over the place. But I think what should guide us now at this moment is the choice that we could still have between whether we want to go to general admission at the theater or we want to go to reserve seat. So I would say that one of the solutions that could be a suggestion for a solution to be introduced is that the so-called first-class buses should be allowed to run the same routes along with the buses who are more affordable for our low-income people. And that's the extent to which you can have some competition. But evidently, you have to continue to be allotting routes to different companies or bus owners, but that will have to be limited. Now, whenever you are doing the permits, I think you need to move beyond what the law had before, and that is what we were prepared to amend. You cannot be giving them a permit for a 1 year, as it used to be, and keep renewing it. The minute you're going to give the permit and you decide it is to be given on some basis of merits, but not simple partisan, which has been one of the problems. But if you can then say we will give out permits for a period that will allow you to recover the investment, then you know then that you have a time within which you want to invest to bring at least some minimum standards in the transportation system. So I think the answer to the problem facing us is, one, the people must be allowed to have the choice to ride the first-class bus or to ride a bus maybe of not the first class. Secondly, you need to be able to limit the amount of owners of buses that will be going on a certain route. The issue now to determine how that will be done. And thirdly, you need to give them those permits for a period where economically it will allow them to be able to recover. That was what we had laid out at the time when I was the Minister of Transport, and I thought it would have worked well. The attempt that was made to create a monopoly within the same government, of course, that I was a part of, but I was not a party to that decision making, is that they wanted to create a monopoly and let one company owns all the buses in the country. That to me did not go down well. That was one extreme end of it. So I would say the solution lies in those 3 points that I make. If those can be taken into account, I think we could find a solution.
Joe, was that a recommendation for a national bus company or a private-owned monopoly, as far as you can remember?
The attempt, which was aborted simply because of the very people who were to get it, they themselves had denied that it was being given, when in fact that was the intent. Yeah. So when they lent $30 million from the DFC to that company to buy out all the other bus lines, the intent was to create a monopoly.
Yeah.
Now, if to me that was the intent, to create a monopoly, if that was your belief that that was your solution, then you should have made it public that the monopoly will be there for a period, and you need to state that period. But then it's how you decide who will get the monopoly. So that monopoly would not have worked because, one, the 30 million that was lent, it was the way it was done. And I think we all know of what that had caused.
Right.
So to me, that monopoly would not have gone down well. The solution was with the IDB, who was prepared to work with us. In fact, we had developed where we would bring all the transportation under one ministry. You would have the air, land, and sea. We had already had the draft bill for that, which was to go through. We would not have been taking a transportation system maybe by the year, and you give the air to the airport authorities. Then you take the bus service, the land service, and you give it to another one. Then you take the marine service, the sea services, No, the three of them were to come under one. And we were to pass, we had the draft legislation to do that. And they will be all under one ministry. And with that, we'd have been able to rationalize and bring some sort of not chaotic system as we're having now. And I think that was the solution we could have worked out. But again, we never been long enough to carry that through.
Interesting. George, any comment?
The from a public policy standpoint, and I'm coaching that by saying that I believe a gentleman by the name of Harold Lasso basically says that any pronouncement by government is policy. And so from a public policy standpoint, I can recall that the current Minister of Transport basically said that there's a need to modernize the bus system. And I think that he was absolutely right. But obviously, the issue of the strategy as to how you realize that broad policy objective has not been articulated, that has not been dealt with. There are obviously other issues of policy that one would need to treat with. So the whole issue of the participation, the whole ideological side of it needs to be dealt with. I was told that there was a time when the father of the nation was quizzed in relation to his party. There were in his party some, what was assumed to be some far left operators, and then there were the sort of ultra capitalists in his party. And the father of the nation basically said, man, my plane don't need two wings to fly. A plane needs two wings to fly, two wings to fly. And so the sort of punctuate to some extent what Brother Joe is saying, in other words, is that somewhere in there, the mixed economy model needs to be brought to bear. There's a need for a sort of public policy to weigh in to regulate the industry, and then there's a need for the market forces to take hold. I can remember some years ago, I was transferred to Belmopan at some point before I retired. And I'll tell you, it was the best in terms of pricing, in terms of comfort, in terms of scheduling, in terms of reliability. You jumped on a bus from Belize City to Belmopan, and there was TV on the bus. There was music on the bus. There was actually also a snack on the bus. And this was when, in my view, the marketplace was allowed to operate. Obviously, there was a role for government, and that role was kind of silent, but obviously government did regulate those runs, who would get to do those runs, etc. It was essentially competition going on the Western Highway. For example, it was essentially Batibus versus Novellas, and to a lesser extent, smaller players like Shaw, etc. And it was obviously national. So I believe, in a sense, the devil is in the details. I believe that absolutely the point made by the minister that, man, you need to modernize is a point well made. One of my colleagues who spent the better part of nearly 40 years in the United States basically said, when I went away and joined the Army in the United States, there was a certain type of bus and a certain vintage of bus running. When I came back to Belize 40 years after, those buses were still on the run. All right, so obviously there's a need for that intervention. I don't know that there's a space for everybody. There's a whole range of issues that you need to treat with. Some of those buses should not be on the run.
Indeed.
And I think that public policy should outline the criteria that would be brought to bear. It needs to be transparent, because obviously there's the issue of quote unquote vested interest might be at play at the highest political level. We don't know that. I am simply saying, in terms of certainty, public policy is really in the right place, but it is not complete. I believe that at the end of the day, customer satisfaction needs to be one of the yardstick. And I think that once the public is kind of satisfied to a large degree with what we will end up with, I think that is the way to go.
All right. Thanks. That's a lot. Leonard, what are your thoughts? Your mic is muted, by the way, Leonard. So you might want to unmute that. Yeah. The floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to commend Mr. Koye for his statements here tonight in regards to this issue that we're trying to discuss. First, whatever we are discussing and whatever we have to say may not make much of a difference because the eyes will have it. But hopefully, I would want to believe that our government, the present government, especially, led by UP government, could do what the past government didn't do, led under the UDP. That is to say, first and foremost, listen to what Mr. Koye articulated here tonight. Consider how good it would have been had it been implemented back in the old days and kept up, even up to today's date. We would have been in a much better situation. And I would really hope that somehow or another, a sage, knowledgeable, experienced person like Mr. Koye to be listened to and have a hearing by our present leaders because they serve the country well.
Yeah.
I'd like to now make my own personal observations, and that is that, yes, we all remember when the bus system used to have good competition, used to have Batty Bus and a whole lot of other, well, I shouldn't say a whole lot, but a few other companies competing for the clientele. They used to run sometime in the same areas, as each other. And people used to make a choice. They could ride the express Batty Bus, which was a little bit more expensive than the regular school buses. And the people who could afford to ride the school buses at least were not inconvenienced in not being able to travel because they were able to pay the lower price and just get the difference in comfort. What seems to be happening right now is that people don't, I'm generalizing, okay? Some people right now don't seem to want to just go out and do what the marketplace requires them to do, which is get their buses, get some runs, develop their runs, and capture their own clientele. What they want to do is swipe out of the hands of those who have a ready-made clientele and who have a captured audience because, of course, they don't have competition in the routes that they're running. And therefore, again, because they don't have the economic wherewithal to go to banks, we just came through a major economic crisis in the country as well as a pandemic. And most of these bus companies that we have in Belize are not in a position to walk into a bank and ask for a loan to just renew their bus fleet. First of all, because they don't have a regular contract that will last them long enough for them to be able to write off properly the cost of the transport or the buses, and then still pay back their loans on a timely basis and be able to have enough to pay their employees and all their maintenance for their equipment. The bottom line is it's a scavenging process going on in the industry right now, where these bus operators are basically taking from one old bus parts to maintain the buses that they are keeping on the road. They're not getting any 75% tax break, so that they can avoid paying full tax to the government and then invest in their equipment, as compared to what we're hearing that operators are having. I don't know how true that is because the minister himself is denying that that's the case, but everybody else in the rest of the world is of that opinion on.
But we know opinion and facts are different, right? So that I have heard it also.
Wait, Mr. Chairman, don't cut me off yet. Give me a chance, sir. Because
sum it up.
I want to finish this point.
Yeah.
We have heard, and I have heard personally what the minister said in his own words. But I beg to differ with what he's stipulating to the general public as compared to what the realities are.
What did he say, first of all?
He did, over a year ago, gave warning to some of these bus companies and telling them to bring up their buses to a different standard.
Okay. Okay. So, all right.
And so, okay. And subsequently, now, after Farelia is running now, taking over a run that somebody else had, why didn't Farelia just start running buses parallel to what Mr. Shaw and the other people were running? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. The government could give them a permit to do that, and they could develop their own clientele. And more certainly than not, a lot of people who are in the tourist environment, or the people who can really afford the extra price, because of course they can probably run the buses at the same price that the older buses are running, and maybe just charge the same price and just push them out of business. That's another tactical way of doing it if they really want to just, achieve the end objective, which is to have this bigger company, modern company with modern equipment, be the standard that they want to achieve. But you can't tell these tour operators that you're going to dispossess them of their livelihood, which the Constitution says that the minister is not supposed to do in the first place. Even though they are authorized with certain power to run the ministries, they are forbidden constitutional-wise take away people's livelihood. That's a different point, though. My issue is, I think if I had followed Mr. Covey's advice, this whole shenanigans that being played out would be avoided, and the end result would still be what they are hoping to achieve. I'll leave it at that right now.
All right, thanks. I think one thing I would make objections to your comments about the clientele, because I don't think these bus owners go out there and develop a clientele as such. The people who need to ride the buses are there. The commuters need to ride anyway. They might choose one bus over the other, but I don't think that the bus companies actually develop a clientele as such.
Chairman, what I'm referring to when I say that, sir, pardon me if you allow me to clarify what I was intending to say. These bus owners that are running this, the bus owners that have the different runs right now, within the context of how the bus system is structured in Belize, okay, because it's different now than it was before, and it's going to be different hereafter than it is currently. My point is that these bus drivers have been around for a while. Most of them have the routes that they have agreed to among themselves in their organizations, and they, over a period of years, many years.
So what you're saying, they've been around for a while. All right.
Yeah.
All right, I got you. And the fact is that means that they had the time to improve their quality of buses and services. I see that they have not done that, and many times we form policies based upon emotions, how we feel about one or the other, and we feel sorry for this one or not sorry for that one, and losing sight of the fact that there's a public to serve and a government's government's job, I believe primary job is to improve the quality of life for its citizens. I don't see a problem with the buses being improved. Mr. Cowie made a point about things like the light and the water, for instance, which are monopolies. And I don't know that we have a big enough population to have competition in everything like that. I'm not sure if maybe the transportation system might not be well served with a monopoly. There are a lot of people who get in there for runs. Some people get runs and don't even have buses. Go out afterwards and try hustle up on the old bus fulfill the run. I think we have to take all of that into consideration. I at this point, I would like, and I've been hollering for years about the quality of buses on the run. Buses breaking down. You try to get a destination, you don't get there. Tires on some of these buses are very the skin, and dangerous. Let's be real. So if they don't have money for buy the tire, if you don't have money to to maintain a bus run, then maybe you should try another job, man. Sell peanuts or something like that, no? But I just think that we deserve better. We see the tourists riding the high-class buses. I don't see why we can't, even if it means getting a company that is subsidized by governments to some degree. I don't know if the 75% that is being thrown around is accurate or not. I would see it as being quite ridiculous. And maybe that's why we need the kind of journalists that will go out there and push a mic in the right people's faces. Find out if indeed there's any, and they could dig in because Public Information Act is there and we should be able to catch that. So I don't know. Let's go back around. And Joe, anything else to add on that?
Oh, well, it's just to reinforce the point that the Ministry of Transport is a regulator. We have the laws already that says that any vehicles on the road must be roadworthy. We also have in the cases of buses that they have to be of a certain minimum standard to be given permits to. Quite frankly, I think what has been happening to us is not the difficulty in designing the proper and appropriate system. But I think the issue facing us is the issue of trust. And that brings us to a very important point, hopefully that we will be on this forum. It's not how we are to be governed that has been plaguing the country. It is more who are the people to govern us. That is the challenge. The system that was developed by the transportation system evidently was very circumspect. It took everything into account. The failures of the market economy in small economies, the need for not being able to have so much open competition on the highways, the need to be able to have proper tendering, fair tendering. All these factors are there, and nobody could really dispute any of them as being necessary. Our problem, my brother, is the question of implementation, compliance. And I would like to just reinforce that point when we come to the issue of the Constitution review. And I will try to bring to you the parallel to what I'm saying now.
Yeah, we could go off into that now. Let's do it. George, you got something to say? Who is that?
Yeah. I was, I was just in relation to the whole bus issue, and I'm kind of rounding off here. From a problem analysis standpoint, I think that there are two streams. There's a sort of public policy stream, and there's a part of political stream. And I think, to a large extent, it's sort of part of political patronage is across the board, and it obviously plays into the bus industry. You yourself, Mr. Chair, has said that there are people who are accorded runs without even having buses.
True.
They have no competence, they have no history, etc. And that is the sort of part of politics of it. One of the ministers, and I won't call names because obviously there could be legal consequences, but I can recall one of the ministers from the current government basically, in relation to this issue, basically said, quote unquote in Creole, that we time we eat now. So irregardless of the issues of service to the public, he's basically saying that my people must now participate. We have to grow beyond that. Public policy is dictating, it's sort of informing that we give reliable service, we give cost-effective service, and we give those services that will be appreciated by the public. And I want to go to Joe on this one. As an economist, obviously, there are limitations within the industry. There's a sort of supply side and the demand side. Everybody that wants to get into the bus industry cannot get into the bus industry. I had talked about the criteria. We need to set clear guidelines and clear criteria as to how we would select those people that should be in the bus industry. To the point made by Joe, a relative of mine, perhaps about 2 months ago, basically said, George, can you help me with coming up with some policy strategy for the bus industry going forward. And when I began to do my research, I was surprised to find that there's a fair amount of very good information as to how to manage the bus industry effectively. And so, to me, what is lacking is the courage to do what needs to be done. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's no need to go to a special consultant to tell us what to do. The answers are there. And so it boils down to political will to do the right thing. What I am hoping that we don't see, going forward for the industry, I'm hoping that we don't see a scenario where we said, you know what, there's a need to change the minister. Or there's a need to change some officials. So we saw that, for example, with Karl Hushner, where there's a kind of crisis brewing. And so the solution to that crisis is, let us move the kind of head political guy from there. That is not the solution any at all. And so I would like to see going forward that we really look at two things. We look at fairness. It has to be fair. And then we look at the whole issue of the economics of it. I believe that perhaps half of the people, and I'm just calling a number here, I believe that half of the people that are in the bus industry shouldn't be there. To a point made earlier by Mr. Brackett in relation to the minister, I can also recall the minister basically saying, shortly after he was given that portfolio, that in modernizing the industry, we will try to make arrangements for bus owners to have access to amenable credit. And I think that that was very responsible and constructive. Now, whether that has taken hold is another thing, but at least the minister from a public policy standpoint recognized that for you to have better buses and for you to have more reliable run, finances has to be a part of the equation, So, that is all I'll say for now in relation to the subject.
Ever it has been said that progress brings problems, and we know that for a fact. I remember a previous gathering of former prime ministers, a forum held at the Bliss Institute, and Dean Barrow said this then: the spoil system has long been in place and will long stay in place, and that is that there's nothing we can do about that. So the point was well made, George, that yes, every time one government come in and get people who want to run buses and because of their political patronage are allowed that, we should move beyond that. We also tend to just move somebody and think that will automatically solve the problem. I don't think it solves the problem even with government. When we change, well, all of a sudden things start going on. We say change everybody, and we change them, and everything remains the same. So that one tough situation we're in, and we have to figure out a way for solve it. No, go ahead, Leonard.
Mr. Chairman, before we go off to the next subject, I wanted to ask Akoye a question. Hopefully, you might be able to illustrate and help whoever would probably listen to this program and may be able to use some of the input that he's providing or has been providing, will be able to help them to move the country a little in a better situation. No? Mr. Akoye? My question,
yes,
sir,
I think I understand your question about how this forum can contribute.
Not yet. I didn't pose the question to you, sir. I wanted to pose a question to you, but I was trying to preface it first with the chairman, no?
Oh, sorry.
I have a question I would like to ask you. Do you think that the one route that is being argued about right now, if they get another 30 buses, those 30 buses are going to the small villages all over the country? as the present school buses are servicing all over the country. Yeah, my question fair enough, or do I need to restate it differently, or is there?
No, I think. Sorry.
Go ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
Let me see if I can maybe answer the question by answering what I perceive to be the epicenter of the problem that is facing our governance in the country. Our problems is not so much our laws. It's not our constitution. And I will say this because I can ask anyone, no, although I support the review of your constitution periodically, but I would like to ask the question, what is it that is in the constitution? Or what is it that is not in the constitution? Why we have such high poverty? Why we have such high crimes? Why we have such corruption? And why we have such unemployment? We identify the problems on these shows and many other shows in this country and all over. And yes, we should identify our problems. Well, I believe one of the great contributions that can be made to this show, and I will emphasize the participatory aspect, is that we need to now begin to address the cause. What is causing the problems in terms of our governance? And I am of the firm belief it is not how we are to be governed in terms of the Constitution, which is quite, to me, adequate, except with some improvements that can be made. I think the problem that is facing us is how do we determine the people who are to govern us? How do we make the decision as to whom we will elect at the polls? It's unfortunate that we go in now with a big commission. And yes, there is a lot of publicity to review the Constitution. But it's so unfortunate that the high percentage of the people in this country doesn't know the Constitution. And though they are to go to consult people, it's not a fair thing. I think we need to look back. We need to look back and ask ourselves, what was it that we wanted in 1981? And have we achieved it? And if we haven't, why we haven't achieved it? We can sit back and say, of course, there have been improvements since 1981. But in evaluating the performance of government, we just can't judge ourselves by the improvement we have made. But we have to judge ourselves by the improvement that we could have made with the resources we have. So I am of the firm belief, after spending over 19 years in government, well, 20 years as a public officer, and 19 years of an elected and appointed politician. And I come to the conclusion, it's not the Constitution, it's not our laws. We have some of the best laws. We have a very good Constitution, but yes, there is some movement. The problem is the people we choose to govern us. If we cannot then get our people, the voters of this country, to better participate in the true sense of participatory democracy, by not just going to the polls and vote, but to use forum like this one tonight, which I pay great tribute to. And I'm really thankful to those who seeded this program. I give credit to those who had the idea to start something like this. It is these kind of programs this country needs. Those of us to whom more have been given has an obligation, a patriotic obligation, to help to educate the others. We came out. Thank God that we came out fighting our way out. But let's go back and bring out the rest. I think we have a moral, patriotic obligation to help go back and bring out the rest. Educate our people. Get them better informed. Let them make the right choices. This is not about PUP or UDP. This is about doctrines and tenets. This is about sense of values. Don't support a party simply because your grandmother did. Support it because you believe in the doctrines and the tenets of the movement. And when the leader is not carrying out the doctrines and the tenets that we subscribe to, then they must be moved.
It is your duty to do so.
I have said before, and I will say to end my opinion here, which I strongly believe in. And yes, it might sound a bit sleazy, but whenever the dog shit in front of that church door, we want to move the church door. They don't want to clean up the mess, nor deal with the dog. I think it's time to come to realization we need to be better informed as to the choice we make at the polls. That, to me, is this epicenter, I would call it, of the problem facing us. How do we choose the people to govern us?
Thank you. Certainly, I hope it's not by $50 and $100. We had a couple.
God bless you, Mr. Bowie.
We had a couple of comments. One, of course, by Sam Dredd, a regular listener. No, Sam Dredd was saying that you're absolutely right. If you're getting competent people in power, then you're getting mediocre results. I think that is true. And certainly we tend to, instead of looking at the people, judging them and vetting them properly, we figure what's in it for me, how much you got for me, what you gonna give me. And I've been to the polls and I've heard people say, well, me never vote for that one, because he don't give me nothing. This one always take care of me. But is it about you, or is it about getting a higher quality of service? From our servants who are in, who we must understand are our servants, not our rulers. We don't have that kind of system. Mr. Leonard Brackett have always been about educating the people. All right, that's one of your fans there, Mr. Brackett, and we appreciate that. Papa Curley says the gangbang politics. Let me see that one again. The gangbang politics is the problem. You are right on. If we elect and select leaders, representatives who has zero management skills, we yield these types of results. And I believe these are all, we all agree to some of these, to most of what is being said here, because of one problem. What we want to know, though, before we move on, and we want to get onto that constitution bit, and we'll take a few minutes and see why I show up on Lisa link on the screen. We'll take a few, we'll do only add, if you will. I want to first of all say that we at the Charlie Burton Park will be doing kites this kite season. And if anybody interested in buying a kite or buy a kite for a child or somebody else, touch bases with us. Now we'll get that done. You see some of the kites where we have already prepared. The kids have been making kites, and we want to ask you for your support and keep these kids off of the street and busy doing something else. See why? It is 8 o'clock straight up, people, here in Belize City. 9 o'clock, actually.
Greetings. Things good, very informative. I'm loving it. I want to say to all our listeners, all our viewers, that we're here every Wednesday at this time. Mr. Brackett will be the one to be telling you the exact time when the time change and all that. So, thankful for Mr. Cowie very much, Mr. Joey, very informative. Of course, he deserves a head. I agree with that. We have Ali clothing line with the Guan. We have Ali you're gonna be seeing some of these lines in Belize. As a matter of fact, you could see my chairman wearing one of our shirts that will be available in Belize in a few, and all you start see all our members wearing them. So if you want to purchase something, a PC from it goes towards our little foundation, a little charity foundation, which is the Charlie Burton Foundation. We love that. We love what Mr. Chairman is doing with the kids, of course. So, let's see what's going on. What else is going on? Oh, we want to say prayers up to Greg Z, of course, one of our regular listeners, to his moms and his pops, and we want to say
going on? Give me an idea where they going
his
with that.
moms and his pops got ill.
Both of them together. Wow.
Yeah, man. One day and then the other day,
Wow.
and that's my man. I mean, we want to say prayers up to him, of course.
Amen.
Yeah, we lost a couple of soldiers. We lost Boo, as affectionately known, and Zato, Mr. Gladden. So prayers up to that family, And Mr. Leonard, we hope you enjoy your day. We will be back on Saturday with the 5.0, which is the music generated show. And next week, Wednesday, of course, we'll be here again. So thank you guys for your patience. We want to say respect to Miss Elder. We want to say respect to AIM. We want to say respect to Janice and all our sponsor us and stuff like that. We'll be giving out more information as we go along on the Wednesdays coming up. So thank you guys. Back to regular programming.
Respect. All right. Wonderful. Guys, so we proceed now. I think where we could look upon, and Joe, while we got you here, we want to tap into your expertise indeed and your thoughts along the line. You pretty much summarized that already by suggesting that the Constitution, in your view, is not so out of whack that we need to concentrate on that. Should we maybe be looking at other things that might improve our governance and the service that we get from our public service servants? Because I think that's one big part of the issue. You know, they don't answer their phone when you call, you don't get no kind of response when you go in person, you get pushed away. You can never see somebody in authority. Is there any way that you think we can improve on this? Is there something you would recommend us do apart from what you already told us in electing better people? We know we need to do that, but how can we improve the service of the people who are already there, who are entrenched?
I believe, Mike, that this issue of participatory democracy, we need to look at it more closely, because it is what keeps democracy robust and alive, with all its inherent inefficiencies. It is not really all perfect. But the point that is need to be made today in this Belize and any democratic society, when we move from the state of nature into the state of a society, the whole purpose was to defend and protect the natural, fundamental, or God-given rights and to expand on them. So your constitution begins with those rights. And then it set up the institutions of government, executive, judicial, and the legislature. And they were to defend and promote and expand on those rights. Now, if you look at our constitution, this is exactly what it has in it. And whereas there may be some areas that you can improve on, and those we can talk about, but what to me is more important is to get the people of this country to let those who elect understand that the people are the people who has the power, not politicians. The people has the power, and the people at the polls delegate authority to these politicians to manage their resources. I think that the electorate is more to be blamed in a sense than the elected, because the risk that is in democracy, as Plato had said, and me and you have discussed that, there's a great risk in democracy. Why some countries do not go for democracy is simply because if the people are not properly informed and educated, then all these obstructions of rights and freedoms become meaningless.
Illusions.
Having the freedom to speak, free speech, but have nothing to say, how can that really advance? So I think that the solution that faces Belize must begin from among the people, to let the political parties and all those who are elected at the polls to understand that they are being delegated the authority to. And then the people must continue to participate, not just for the 5 minutes at the polls. And obviously, we need now to reverse that vicious cycle of the patronage system, where so many people today in this country are willing to take the bribe to vote. And this is not just among the poor who may be in need of it, but these are among people who are of a higher level. So I think we have to maybe look at it from this perspective, Chairman, right?
Mm-hmm.
If there is only 20% of us, of the 400,000, well, let's say the 148,000 out of the elected, if there is only 10% of us, even lower, but if the 10% of us decide to take this seed that you all have sown, this platform, this forum, and expand on it right through this country, where we can begin to educate our people, where we can make them understand that the delegated authority will not be abused. There is a thing obviously called civil disobedience. If you abuse my taxes, if you do not carry out the Finance and Reform Act to have them audited at the right time by the Auditor General, if you do not keep proper accounts, I can withhold my tax. The people can say we are not going to pay any more tax. We'll put it into an escrow. And when you account to us, then we will begin to move the tax. Those are things that we have control over. I'm not saying we quickly jump to withhold it, but we have to let the elected understand that the power is with we, the people. And those who are prepared to take the bribes, those are the ones that will be named and shamed. But we can begin this process towards shifting that vicious cycle into the virtuous cycle it once was, and bring back the sense of values that we had in the 30s, 40s that brought us to the promised land. We need to bring back the values of those people who led this revolution to the promised land. Those are the values we want back.
The tricky part.
This forum, to me, should serve as an example that it can expand itself across this country. It can bridge the divide between the Belizeans here and the Belizeans out there.
I think, Joe, a trick in that will be to get people to be objective as opposed to subjective. Because many times we see our own problems and our own concerns as being paramount, when in fact we have to look at country first. And I think this is where we go wrong a lot of time. Everybody is just looking at what's in it for me, as opposed to what could be in it from me. And when we get to that point where people start looking at the good of the country as opposed to the good of myself or my family or even those who I like, we could get forward. And Sam Drake says that, yes, the people have the power. They treat politicians as a cult figure, which is dangerous for democracy. Yes, because then it'll be no different than a dictator or a dictatorship being run by a couple of people who promote themselves as being servants of the people when in fact they're rulers and not less. George, where are they?
I just wanted to identify with the education aspects that Joe spoke about. I do not believe that there can be any constructive engagement on the Constitution without major public awareness and education. I can tell you that in my immediate family, my immediate household is 5. My extended household is about 10. My extended family living in Belize would probably number about 100. And that's a good number, because if 99 out of 100 knows anything about the Constitution, that's a lot. I do not believe, I had to, from a professional standpoint, understand what the Constitution is, what it's supposed to be, what the clauses are. But I'll tell you, I'm probably there's not more than 2 or 3 people in my family, extended family, that knows what the Constitution is. And so I have to underscore the fact that there needs to be a major consultation, because without that, you will not get the kind of inputs that you need. One of the problems, as I see it, and again I'll identify with what Joe said, is that it's the implementation aspects. The implementation aspects of laws generally that is lacking. I believe, yes, there are issues in the Constitution that we obviously need to look at. I believe that the whole issue of the separation of powers perhaps definitely needs to be looked at. I don't know if the Constitution is the place to actually backstop it. There's the issue of term limits. There are a range of issues that perhaps could be situated in the Constitution, but I think generally Belize is flooded with laws. Belize is flooded with regulations, and at the end of the day, it is not so much the Constitution that is really the major stumbling block. to peace and prosperity. I think it's the capacity and the courage to implement that is really keeping us from going where we need to be. I want to say, just for general public education, that the Constitution Commission, that the Constitutional Commission has about 18 months to do its work, and we're already a couple months down that road already. So time is of the essence. Personally, I'm hoping that the education campaign is robust enough to make a meaningful engagement with, across the country. It has to be national dialogue, including with the diaspora. Those are stakeholders also. Those are our people.
Right. And again, our initial objective has been bridging the gap, trying to bring the diaspora closer. We know that they have been involved as far as remittances and whatnot, but I think there's a lot more that the diaspora can offer apart from political engagement. We have enough politicians, really, and the politicians there, they're not the ones who make the difference. Joe has pointed out, and you has agreed, that in fact the people are the bigger part of making this work. If we could get involved from that level, as opposed to everybody trying to jump in there and being a minister, because it's a wonderful thing to be able to be the one for the run to and be the one for dish out the spoils and whatnot. But to roll up your sleeve and get in there and work, I don't think it has to be with a ministerial portfolio at all. It's just a matter of will to get it done and make something happen. Brackett, I see you chewing at the bit there. I know you got something to say.
You set the floor for me. Or to set me up, one or the other. But anyhow, our problem in governance in Belize, as Mr. Koye observed earlier, is not necessarily all together with the Constitution, which may need some little tinkering here and there, and maybe some major changes here and there. What part of the current Constitution does the people who are espousing a review of the present Constitution are interested in dealing with? Because as far as the powers that is vested in our current government and governance system via the Constitution is concerned, the ministers, let me take that back. The members of the House are empowered through recommendations from Cabinet and the government, and even sometimes from the opposition, if sometimes what they're saying makes some sense, and the people in the ruling party with the majority would like to support their perspective. The bottom line is that they are authorized to make amendments to certain parts of our Constitution if they really think that they need to make some changes. It is only when you want to do a wholesale change of the Constitution, you decide that you're going to empanel a constitutional reform. I have a phone messing around with my sorry panelists. I have a phone. I got to deny this call because I get out of this stuff because it's messing with my ears. Yeah. What I was trying to say is that you empanel a constitutional review commission, which is valid, by the way. I mean, there's nothing wrong to change your constitution if you really need to. That is not my point. That we can't change the constitution. I'm saying that to empanel a constitutional review commission indicates that you have a serious problem with the current constitution and that you can't make the necessary changes to the House of Representatives as you're currently empowered to do. Or in other words, then maybe you will just defaulting your own responsibilities and hiding behind the commission itself. Because by the time the commission is finished with whatever they bring forward, as wide as a constitution as they are able to do, and as effective a job as they're able to do within the time that is prescribed to them right now, at the end of the day, none of them in that group will be the draft person who draft the legal wordings of the Constitution, where a lot of changes can happen that was not intended by the original people who put the wordings together right now in this particular commission. And by the time the House of Representatives gets to vote on it or debate it and vote on it, and even before then, by the time Cabinet and the rest of the people up in the hierarchy of our governance system, the legal minds, you know, the attorney generals, the different. Anyhow, I'm getting into detail and back down into the weeds. What I'm trying to intimate though is that whatever end up coming out and given to the people to vote on will require the people to understand what is it that they're voting on. As Mr. Mybit just earlier said, how many of our current people in the country actually understand the present constitution? Or how many of them will be able to spend enough time to understand the new proposed constitution before they vote on it and accede to it and say, this is what we want? And by the way, I haven't mentioned yet about the changes that the government is empowered to make before it presents it for a final vote in the House. I mean, there are so many other different things that needs to be considered in the context of this job or this effort.
You're saying they can make changes before they even take it to the House?
It has to be done. That's part of what you call the review process.
Yeah, no, but that's not.
The commission will deliver its findings
right
to the cabinet or to the government per se.
Correct.
The government in cabinet.
The prime minister.
The prime minister will have cabinet meetings and discuss these matters before they can take it to the House for a House voting. It never goes to the House before cabinet discusses it.
Yeah, but that's not.
If people understand the process and the procedure, I think Mr. Koik can more elucidate us on that if I'm wrong, as regards to what I'm stipulating.
No, but what I'm questioning is what you said, that they could make those changes before even taking it to the House.
It is not what, sir, what I mean. Let me clarify then, because it seems as from the statement you are making, it seems that there's something missing. So let me clarify and probably try to add that little, what I think is a missing part, right? To maybe help along. The draft people will take the information that the commission arrives with and concludes on, because they will have a vote among themselves. Their eyes will have a say as to the final product that they're putting out. Okay? When they put out that final product and it goes to the Prime Minister, before the Prime Minister takes it to the House of Assembly for a vote on what then would become our constitution, if the plebiscite accepts it as well, which is another part that I had mentioned earlier, because that's going to be required. The bottom line is that you have what you call the technical draftsmen, the legal draftsmen, to whom this document is going to be presented and who has to put this document into a legal structure, a constitutional legal framework. Okay, all these things are part of the process. It's not being discussed right now because we haven't gotten there, and it's outside of. I'm sorry.
Aren't you getting a bit ahead of yourself though? Because yes,
it's important for us to understand that, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, hold on though. But I would think that we do. We understand that the people who are looking at it are putting it together, going out, getting the consultations, as they say, and then put a draft together. But that doesn't mean that they're changing anything. And it has to go to the House first. And I would hope even to a referendum probably before any major changes can be made. You see?
Precisely is what I'm saying. But then my point was that from the time the ayes have it in the Constitutional Reform Committee, that point that everybody understands that everybody's along with me at that point so far?
No. What are you saying? Does that mean that there's
Let me finish it then. From the time, let's say, for example, in this case, Mr. Maggot and the other members of the committee
Right.
agrees among themselves
Right.
that this is what they have produced as a final product to be sent to the Prime Minister.
Right.
They will not have in there the shalls and the may and the will and all these different. The technical draft person uses the English language to convey certain impressions, and when lawyers go to court, those impressions from two different lawyers have two different perspectives or meaning or interpretations. Then a judge is required then to parse that difference. I'm saying to you that when the legal draftsmen take these documents and put them into legal form and create what then becomes the proposed constitution that the Prime Minister will then present as head of government in the House of Representatives, it would have been drafted in a draftsman language, as we now have the current constitution.
Mr. Brackett, if I may, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I think that you have spoken, I think, eloquently to the process or elements of the process. There's a commission that has been empaneled to basically there's a technical commission that has been empaneled to put the views, opinions, and values of the public together. That commission does not have the remit to basically synthesize a distillate that would go to the Prime Minister outside of understanding that it's the will of the people that will be embraced and put together in a document to the Prime Minister. To the point that you are making,
Mr. Mayor, please.
Hold on. To the point that you are making, and I hope that perhaps Mr. Kawhi.
Yes, but I'm not having an argument with you on that point, Mr. Mayor.
I am not arguing with you.
It's a valid point that you're bringing forward, but it's not the point that I'm trying to bring to your attention.
Gentlemen,
I think that you're going in circles in relation to the legal drafts issue.
One
and
second.
I want to say that at some point, the Prime Minister, I think, and you are right here, will take it to cabinet. At some point, the legal drafts team would weigh in on that. And I would like to think that at the point that it reaches the House for discussion and debate, it will be in legal language.
Let me say something. Let me interject 1 minute.
It has to be. It has to be.
To me, if there's a concern that you have,
George, and this is not about
it will be a legal document. Really,
this is not about what you're talking here. And there's something, an annoying noise that we're getting here. I don't know if anybody else can hear it.
I'm hearing it.
So it's very distracting.
There's a scratching noise somewhere.
CY, do you have your mic on, CY? Could that be it? All right, see that stop.
Let me mute my mic.
No, start again. All right, then you, George. Put your mic back on. Let me.
I'm gonna mute mine.
Yeah, but not you neither. So let me mute mine then. Let me see where I got you. There's an annoying thing, man.
Yeah.
It's very distracting. Let me see mine.
Some connection is not fully made along the process. There's a connection that's not totally engaged or fully engaged. Mine's all right.
Anyway, you get what George was saying, because basically what I was saying, that you're suggesting that they have some authority to make some change. I imagine they have an authority to put it in a certain context and present it in that context. But until it goes before the Prime Minister and before his cabinet and before the House and hopefully before the people, there's nothing that can be done. Are we clear on that one?
Okay, a quick way of solving that perspective. What the eyes have in the commission may not necessarily be what the people vote on. Is that too much of a stretch to understand or interpret what I'm trying to convey?
No, but that's basically, that doesn't need that kind of discussion there, because what they present, you're saying they might be mischievous and put something that the people are saying that they didn't see it. No, just to try to clear it up, man. Just stay with the class here. I'm trying to get clear what you're trying to see. It's basic. It's easy. It's not that difficult, Leonard, really. What are you saying exactly? You're saying that I'm
saying that there are different stages and different levels that this document will have to pass through before it gets to its final. This is the Constitution of Belize as accepted by the country of Belize.
Okay. I mean, and
from what we get from one stage to the different phases that it has to go through, there's what you call. What happens is that things changes. I mean, simple way of saying it. Things could change from one point to the next. That's all I'm trying to say.
Right.
We are not at the end yet, so we can't say, well, it did change.
You're suggesting that in fact, the people might want something, and the commission says something else. Is that what you're saying?
No. You're doing it backwards. The commission says something as they are authorized right now to come up to say, right? In their document that they present to the Prime Minister as their end product.
Right.
The Prime Minister will discuss this matter in cabinet, most logically.
Right.
But before he takes it to the House for a vote, the matter will have to go through the hands of legal draft people.
Yes.
Those legal draft people have to dot the I's and put in the shalls and the will and the may and the all. They have to present this document the way a constitution is supposed to be presented and written. It's a completely different task than the task that was originally done by the people who presented from the commission. From my vantage point, presenting something that is more comparable to the preamble of the Constitution.
We understand that you're.
I know you understand that, Mr. Maibit.
The act itself is basically saying that this issue will be put to the people. You use the word plebiscite. It will go to the people for them to basically analyze and have their say on. I would like to think that that will happen. That will happen before it is brought to the House of Representatives to weigh in on. You see, so I understand your concern, your caution, and your skepticism in terms of what happens at the legal drafting stage. But after the legal drafting stage, it goes to the people. That is definitive and explicit in the act itself. I would advise generally that people go to the act. There's a public policy, there's a Freedom of Information Act that anybody from the public has the right to basically go. It's online actually, to see what the act itself of the commission says.
The people that will vote as a plebiscite in a referendum on this matter, from whom
yes, it will, sir. It's explicit.
Wait. No. I was making a statement.
Yes.
And you're answering the question or a statement that I hadn't put out.
Yes, but
give me a second. Let me finish what I'm saying.
Yes,
the
sir.
people that will vote, that is the plebiscite in a referendum on this matter,
yes,
would presumably be more educated about this particular proposed constitution than the people right now are familiar with our current constitution. Is that to be assumed? What period of time would be allowed or could be allowed for the people, the masses, to really appraise themselves about what is it they're casting a vote yes or no on? Is my question.
Well, remember, there's an education.
It's a different question. No, it has nothing to do with the previous statement.
No, there's
a different question.
There's an education process to inform what the Constitution currently is. There's a process of input by the public, and there's a process of synthesis that puts together the concerns, the views, and the opinions of the public that will be handed to the Prime Minister.
Is there, let me ask you a question, George. Is there a plan to educate people on what it currently is in the Constitution?
Yes,
because you have agreed, Mr. Kawhi has pointed out, and I think we all understand that not many people even read the Constitution. They wait until something comes up at a certain point, then they go in there and make reference if they even have a copy of the Constitution. Is there some part of this program that will make available, first of all, the Constitution, then do an educational process to apprise people of what is in there, what they might want to change?
Mr. Chair,
sir,
I spoke about the 18 months that the Prime Minister has instructed the Commission to basically come up with a product. A large part of that 18 months will be dedicated to public education.
Okay.
Public education in terms of what the Constitution currently is, and public education in relation to what the people want. What is it that they want to be in the Constitution? That has been defined.
Will they take it to the schools?
It will go to the schools, it will go to the interest groups, and it will go to the general public. It's all spelled out in there.
I see.
It's all spelled out, sir.
Any thoughts, Joe? Your mic is muted. Your mic is muted, sir. Joe, your mic muted. Take your mic off from mute. See why that you do it? Joe, do you see a mute button?
He's still muted. He's still muted.
Yeah, Joe is muted.
The little red. Tell him to look for the little red mic. When it's muted, it's red. When it's not, it's white.
I think see why. Yeah, there you go, Joe. You're good.
All right, it's all muted.
Yeah, you're being heard now, Joe. Go ahead.
As I think it has been well ventilated just now as to the process. And at the end of the day, we hope that indeed that the people will make the decision and the Parliament will endorse it now.
Yeah.
They have the power to do it. So,
Joe, do you have any particular part of the Constitution that you think, in your view, should be looked at or might be changeable?
I think first we need to look at the 21 sections, if I remember them, of the fundamental rights, and to see if there is any room that we want to expand on those rights. 1, 2, to see if any of those rights may have been mitigated by some provisional laws. I think when we have examined those, then we have dealt with the main part of the Constitution. The next important thing, and that's the process I would recommend indeed, is that we will look now at the institutions, meaning the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, to see whether, in fact, because that's the whole purpose of your Constitution, whether the institutions are adequate enough as they are to provide for the expansion and the protection and defense of those rights. Now, we have heard many things that have been spoken of, and some of them make some very good sense. For example, presently, some believe that the cabinet, the Prime Minister's choice is limited to the elected and the few who come through the Senate. There have been talk of shifting it slightly to the Republican type, where the Prime Minister would in fact then be free to elect from among the populace. Those are some issues that I know have been raised. Issues have been raised which I don't think necessarily will have to be addressed by the Constitution, but will and must be addressed. But I think most of those will be in the provisional laws, what they call the discretionary powers of ministers. Now, those discretionary powers, we know some of them indeed need to be removed because they are not necessary any longer. The period have gone. The world has moved away from those. But you will not do it to the point of straitjacketing the executive. That you cannot do. I think there will be some need to strengthen some of the internal controls that is in the Constitution itself, and particularly the provisional laws that flows from it. So in essence, we are looking at the fundamental rights, see what we want to expand on, see what are any of them that maybe have been mitigated and address that, and look at the institutions that are supposed to defend and expand and protect those rights.
Joe, go ahead.
Joe, go ahead. You go ahead.
Tell me, is there a possibility that we could have representatives dealing with the affairs of their constituencies, and then the cabinet being comprised of technocrats, as opposed to, take for instance, you have the minister, a minister from Khalid being in charge of education and tend to favor the members of his constituency in order to get reelected. There's something I think out of whack there. Is there a possibility we could do that? And can we make some changes without going straight over to a Republican system? Can we stop somewhere in between?
Mr. Chairman, before we switch over to that point, can I say something on what Mr. Koi was saying earlier or just now?
Can he answer this question first for me before you lose track of that?
It might change the perspective. Go ahead. No problem.
I think, Mr. Chairman, that one of the mistaken beliefs that have been held commonly, and I could understand why, of people who never been involved in the governance. But sometimes we tend to believe that we need to make laws to restrain people who cannot restrain themselves. And that's all right for the society at large. But when you are dealing with the people who you are electing and appointing to manage your affairs, you need to put in place, and that's one of the international fundamental principles for internal controls. You need to put in place internal controls, not to straitjacket the executive from using their initiative and being proactive. But you will put in place, and that is where we need to make some changes in the internal controls to ensure that you assume first that you're electing people who are honest, people who are competent. That's what you have to begin with. Because we're not supposed to believe that we're going to go elect people who are not, even though we do it. But we have to design our laws and our internal controls and the assumption, and that's for private and public sector. You design them and the assumption that the people who you are delegating the authority to are competent and that they are honest. Now, the internal controls will be there to ensure that in the event they snap, you will be able to pick it up in a very timely manner and address it. These are some areas that I believe we will need to look at, because some of the internal controls that we have in place are somewhat outdated. And then some of the discretionary powers will need to be reduced. You cannot continue to have discretionary powers where ministers are not needed to make the final decision. And those are very much, I could give you an example right now of one that people really abhor, which is in the Ministry of Natural Resources. When the people want to do a subdivision of their land, you have a lot utilization authority. That is the authority with the technical people that make sure that the subdivision comply with the laws of the country. Then when you don't do that and the LUA approves it, it must go to the minister for final approval. There have been cases where the minister, for sinister reasons, partisan reasons, had refused to approve when she should not be given that discretion.
Yeah.
The case has gone to the court. And the government lost the case. And the government had to compensate tremendous amount of money because the minister abused the discretionary power. So therefore, those kind of discretions will have to be removed. They need not be there. You have some discretions that will need to be modernized. Granting fiscal incentives, where again you have a body of people in a cabinet deciding whether this particular entity will get it or not. You need to remove those from the subjectivity and make them more objective by removing them from ministerial discretion. If they say, for example, we want a part of the country, let's say the PG area, we need it to be developed in a particular, maybe agriculture, agro-industry, whatever it is. So that's a policy decision being taken by a government. And once they say that these are the requirements you must meet to enjoy the fiscal incentive, then it is finished. The law is there. All you have to do now is to prove to the bureaucrats who will oversee these things and to satisfy that you have met the law. It's not for them to
Mhm.
decide. The law has decided that for you. And that's one of the things that we need as citizens to realize. It's not ministers should be made to make decisions. Once the
Yeah.
law has been passed, the minister must comply with the law.
Amen.
So
Mr. Chairman?
those are areas that I think we need to
yeah,
look at in the
Mr.
yeah,
Chairman?
constitution.
yeah. One second. The unfortunate thing, though, Joe, is that not everybody can afford a court case to take it to there. Go ahead, Brackett. Go ahead.
Well,
Um,
I would sorry.
let me Koyi finish your thought now? And then I could jump
I
in.
just
Go ahead,
wanted to
Mr. Koyi.
respond to the chairman.
Yes, sir.
The
Yes, sir. Go
statement
ahead.
being
Finish your
made
thought.
that people does not have the capacity to defend themselves. It's true. But when that happens, it's because the justice system is not just. If you have a minister abusing his power, and that the only way the citizen can seek redress is go to the court, then it should not have been you having a minister to abuse the power and force a citizen who may not be able to have the capacity to resist. And then what happens? The minister gets away. So we have to begin on an assumption
Over and
that
over that has
people
happened.
to be elected, that the electorate will be more sophisticated, if I could put it that way, in making the choice. And once the choice has been made, the citizens continue to be the oversight and the monitor to ensure that elected people do what they need to do. And if they don't, the people then can take action into their own hands and address it.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Brackett.
On Mr. Koyi's point, for example, that you brought up a little earlier about the derogation of rights, basic civil rights, constitutional rights, and inalienable rights. The government is prohibited under the current constitution from violating the supremacy clause of Section 2. And the reason why the issue of rights always come to bear first and foremost is that many a times our government, when they authorize the powers of governance, in particular instances, for whatever nefarious reason or personal reasons, some people get drunk with power and they turn around and want to abuse individual rights. And that's intolerable in a democratic society and in a society where we have the rule of law. And therefore, the Constitution provides for redress when people's rights are being derogated. That you could actually ask for, if you can afford it, like we just discussed, or Mr. Koyi just mentioned as well, about the affordability, and the chairman as well mentioned about the affordability of being able to go to court. Not everybody can afford to. Because as a matter of fact, some people that could probably afford to go to court do not want to go to court because they feel like they're going to be spending their money with a deep pocket government that has the public purse. And sometimes they go ahead and they prevail, but some other times they don't, just because the government wears them down. And therefore, it is unbecoming for a government and ministers to not know their constitutional obligations and the rights of the people. And you cannot derogate the right of an individual through a governance edict, when in fact anything that you decide as a government should be applicable to everyone in the society, not a specific or particular individual. And that's where they come forward with the law many times. And that's why we have the case of the various court case. We have the case of the Boeing court case. We have the case, where the learned judge, Supreme Court judge had to scold the government in various instances. Again, in a case where Mr. Koyi was being taken advantage of by the UDP government as well. So, these things, and these people just take it for granted that because they're entrusted with our governance powers, that they can just haul and pull on and disabuse the citizens of their constitutional rights, and it's unfortunate. But anyhow, I'll leave that off.
I must make mention, with your permission, Mr. Chair, that two things. Firstly, this current constitutional commission is not the only institution to look at the Constitution, there has been previous efforts, and I'm just calling a number here. There's probably about 3 or 4 previous efforts, and those have kind of yielded a range of recommendations that should be shared with this panel, so that you know that a number of the issues that Mr. Coy brought up, for example, has been articulated in the same form, but different forms, but with the same ideas. So there's a rich harvest of issues to draw on for the current commission and for anybody that is charged with sort of looking at reforming or tweaking the Constitution. The issue that I would like to talk about in relation to this is that we talk about separation of powers. And when you look at it from the standpoint of the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature, you could say that that separation of power works in terms of silos. It's a sort of vertical separation of powers of the institution of government. But there's also the need for the sort of horizontal separation of powers. And what am I saying here? I am saying here that there's a division of labor between the elected representatives, i.e. the ministers, and certainly the ministers of state, and the general operation of the public service. A lot of what happens in Belize is that the ministers have taken on an executive everyday management function. Mr. Coy spoke about lands, but I could tell you that it's obviously not on the lands. There's a range of issues that cross certainly the department that I was working with for 27 years, the Fisheries Department. There are decisions that are taken by the government, by the minister, that is really, in a sense, it's micromanagement. And I believe that when you talk about fixing essentially the discretionary powers of the ministers, one need to recognize that there's also an impact to the discretionary powers. And I think that that should be slated as discretion / indiscretion, because in many, many instances, what accrues is the potential for corruption and the potential for skullduggery. So it's not only changing the laws and perhaps aspects of the Constitution to sort of streamline what the ministers does, but it's really to recognize that it has negative consequences on the outputs and the outcome of government. So, you know, I'm just kind of repeating that separation of powers is not only vertical, but it's also horizontal. The issue again of CEOs and permanent secretaries, this is an issue that has been dealt with in the past, and it's an issue that I feel will be dealt with going forward. Do we need them? And what should be embedded in the Constitution? No. Mr. Chair, will we have time, and I'm not kind of cutting off here, but will we have time to discuss the Ukraine thing tonight? Because I know it's actually 10 minutes to 10. So just a question. You know, not to stymie.
Your mic is off, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. All right, yeah. I believe we could do the last 10 minutes on the Ukraine matter. I think it's going to have huge implications across the globe, and Belize will not be spared from the repercussions of what is happening there. I think we have to look at it. I find what is unfortunate is that we have a United Nations with no teeth, and America basically runs things. I find it unfortunate, and because now we see China and Russia having exercises, having talks. We have of other nations. We know Iran is in the wings. We know North Korea is there looking on. We know that other countries that might be secretly harboring some kind of ill will is there. we note that America itself, within itself, is a nation really divided between two ideologies that is kind of complicating matters even more. I hope that we can America can come to its senses in this one and understand that what they're pushing, that there are people who are suggesting that there are things in America that needs addressing much more than a war across the planet. And who can say anything to the U.S.? And that is my question there. You got any what are your views on this, George?
My views is that, strangely, I think that a fair amount of people believe that um, America stands for peace, but really, I was looking at a feature that basically says that when you look at the military industrial complex of America, America has not been making noise for peace. America has been making noise not overtly to continue the war, but to basically say that we will back Ukraine in terms of its defense. And what America is also saying is that we are looking at all of these companies, BlackRock, etc., that makes the armaments of war to basically go into Ukraine to do what they do best, which is to supply and to advise. So, morally and from a geopolitical standpoint, America is not a peacemaker in this one. They have not. They have said nothing. They have said nothing to basically convince anybody that that peace is a part of the goal of the United States. China sounds like the adult in the room, and China is basically saying, "Listen, this war has impacts. It has economic impacts, and there's a huge human cost, and we need to get people to the table." What worries me personally is that it seems to me that America has this is fixed on this mentality that this is a unipolar world. It's the United States and its allies, and then the other countries. And I don't think that they have come to the realization that there's China and there's Russia and they're the BRIC countries, BRIC countries, South Africa, Brazil, etc., that are players that one need to contend with. It's not a unipolar world. And I think that that is what is driving the American foreign policy, is this belief that if it doesn't go the American way, then it's not going anywhere. And it's a dangerous place to be in geopolitically.
Joe, any comments on this matter?
Yeah, I no doubt that the war has been very costly in terms of human lives and in terms of economic issues. It is widespread and it is hurting the world. But I think what we need to look at here, and I would tend to move on to focus on the choice between a liberal democracy and a centralized planned autocratic society. I think the people of any country in the world should have the right to choose who they want to belong with. We talk about the freedom of association at the nation state level. And why not a freedom of association at the international level? So if the Ukraine wants to associate with countries that are of the same democratic ideology as they are, then they should have the right to do that. Now, I know the counter argument will be that, well, the truth about it is that America has chosen not to perpetrate that kind of thinking because of the Monroe Doctrine, when Russia had to remove its missiles from Cuba, and the United States had to remove from Turkey. But the point needs to be made is that if a country wants to pursue liberal democracy as opposed to centralized planned autocratic leadership, then they should have the right to do that. So some might argue again that, that the West has provoked Russia. Well, if Russia felt that it was likely to be threatened by Ukraine joining NATO, maybe there was another way he could have tried to deal with it, rather than just believe he can go in and use force. So I kind of feel like the price that we are paying is that people believe is the just price for democracy. But it is carrying a high cost to the world, not just to Ukraine. And that's basically my perception of that Russia-Ukraine issue about. That's what I think it's about. It's the issue of ideology.
The interesting thing is that it seems that, and they've been taking polls in America, that the Americans might be getting a bit fatigued, battle fatigue. But given that's only about half of them now, because they're saying now it's leaning more towards more than half are anti the war now, as opposed to first when a majority was in favor before it started getting so costly and they start seeing the everyday effects on their pocketbooks. I think, and that where the bottom line is here right now. I think we're going to start seeing some anti-war movements pretty soon in America, and that when it get very interesting. We'll see how it goes from there. Yeah, Mr. Brackett.
I think there's a need for a little bit of fleshing out, and I hope I'm not going to be castigated for being provocative, as I always turn out to be. But in this instance, and with this issue, since it was asked a little earlier, and I tried to avoid having to at least comment too much on it, because I don't have a penny in the dollar, like I said. But the bottom line is I have a lot of knowledge about the background issues relating to all these factors. So I want to expound a little bit. First of all, if people remember who Mikhail Gorbachev was, they will understand who Vladimir Putin is. Not too many people could go all the way back and know and understand the history of those two individuals and why is it that we are where we are today. But based on what Mr. Koya just mentioned, I'd like to go on his point and say that Putin is actually aggrieved about the fact that Mikhail Gorbachev, as the last president of the Soviet Union, which then was the empire of the Soviet Union, comprising a lot of different other countries, other than just Russia, and a few other little countries right now that are still hanging around in their own geographical sphere. What Mr. Putin is trying to do, and long before he went after Ukraine, he was disciplining other little small countries around his neighborhood, Abkhazia, Georgia, and a few others, and intimidating them to the point where he didn't want them to become part of the Western Alliance. What happened is that he thought he would just run into Ukraine. First of all, before that, a lot of people in Ukraine are actually Russian speaking and of Russian origin. As a matter of fact, there was a point in time in the history of Ukraine where Ukraine was the capital of Russia, of the Soviet Union. I'm talking about some hundreds of years back now, right? Longer period than we are actually accounting for in our present discussion, but just to contextualize and to understand why Mr. Putin has this concept or this idea that these other countries that used to be a part of the whole empire justifiably belong to that empire, and whatever they want to do with those countries in order to discipline them or bring them back under the umbrella of that empire, the Western powers, including America and NATO, should butt out. And we find ourselves in a situation where he miscalculated and went into Ukraine, knowing that Ukraine was a smaller country than theirs, less military capability, and Ukraine was actually one of the subscribers to the nuclear disarmament agreements, that they gave up all their nuclear weapons. At one point, Ukraine had more nuclear weapons than the Soviet Union itself. I mean, they are part of the Soviet Union. Let me take that back. And then Russia. That was where they used to do most of their nuclear research and their nuclear development. And, what happened is that he thought he'd just go in there now in this present incarnation and discipline them, take over the capital, take over the country, because prior to this war starting, there was a sympathetic leader of Ukraine that was overthrown and kicked and basically ran out of Ukraine and went to the Soviet Union, which is why they call this group of people the Maidan group, and the Soviet Union classified them as fascists. Maidan is a park where they had a big demonstration that ended up overthrowing the previous government, as Mr. Koye had mentioned before. That this issue of where people have the right to protest against their government legally without resorting to violence or force. These people did that and succeeding in doing that.
Do you know how many of those? Do you know how many of those uprisings have been stirred up by other foreign powers that has done that to benefit their own personal goals?
Yeah, but we're talking about this particular. Yeah, I'm trying to contextualize this one particular.
You don't think anybody?
Issue.
You don't think anybody was involved in that? It was the Ukraine. Only Ukraine did that. They did.
Oh no. Most of these things are done by foreign agents. It's never the local people. The local people are just fodder.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
But anyhow, let me close up because I was taking too long. So Mr. Putin now made a miscalculation in going into this place, Ukraine, thinking that with all the weapons that he pushed into the country initially, he was going to run over the country in about a week or so and intimidate the defenders of the country and its people and subjugate them and bring them back into the fold, because they dared to chase out the governance that they had before that was more closer to him. Mm-hmm. And the people, they resisted. And America and other countries came to the rescue of Ukraine. Why? Because Ukraine decided that they wanted to join NATO. So America is lending them support, and NATO is lending them support. But it wasn't NATO and America that told Mr. Putin to go in there with all his invasion forces when he was claiming that they were just there for practicing around the size of the country. He lied all the way from the beginning to the end. And he is the only person that could stop this war as of today date that we are having this discussion. The war can't be stopped by China, it can't be stopped by the US, and it can't be stopped by the Western powers.
You sound like an able propagandist, but that's all right. I hear you.
The program wouldn't have finished if you didn't even go on there, Mr. You like going there,
right.
Man.
Right. But you tend to.
I'm giving you the facts as they are, but they don't comport with your perspective or expectation.
You're giving opinions, sir.
I'm giving you.
You're giving
all right, whatever you want to call it. I'm giving you a different perspective than what you hold, and it doesn't comport to your expectation. So you're gonna belittle it. You're trying to play games with it, but.
There you go. You're gonna talk.
Be free.
You're gonna speaking until I can start.
No. I could cut off the mic. I could cut off the mic.
You're still at top. Anyway, but you throw out opinions, man, as if they're facts. They're not facts. They're your opinion, and you have a right to them. You have a right to that. There's no problem. Listen.
My opinions are informed by facts, sir. Not by I didn't create these ideas or concepts or knowledge that I'm spewing out here. I'm not the progenitor of the information. So why are you going to blame me? I'm just the messenger. Like messenger anyhow. Sorry.
All right. Yeah. Gentlemen, it's that time. It's after 7. It's after 10. Really, Mr. Koye, it's been a pleasure, sir. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking the time to spend a couple of hours in our company and sharing some insight, some wonderful information with us. George, as usual, a pleasure. Leonard, a pleasure.
God bless. Thank you, Mr. Koye.
Same time, same place. Next week, Wednesday.
And thank you all.
10 o'clock. Respect every time, people. We out.
people.